Sunday marks the beginning of our 2016 pledge drive. I'd like to begin this pledge season by telling you how I came to Unitarian Universalism and why this church is important to me. So here is my story. It begins in Morristown, New Jersey in 1966. My daughter Mitzi came home from kindergarten one day when she was 5 years old and announced that she wanted to go to Sunday school because all of her friends were going to Sunday school. There was no church that her father and I were interested in going to, and I was not going to take my children to a church I was not willing to go to myself. I talked this problem over with a teaching colleague of mine during our lunch break, and she told me that I would make a good Unitarian. After many more conversations, she convinced me to come to a work party at her church. I fell in love with the church as soon as I walked in. This congregation had just bought a 3-story mansion on an acre of ground for $40,000. Cheap, even in those days. The nursery had hand-painted murals of life-size toy soldiers marching around all 4 of its walls. We were to paint only the casings around the windows. The soldiers were to stay. Mitzi, Dana, and I went to church almost every Sunday after that. The congregation had just called a minister from Star King Seminary in Berkeley, and I loved his sermons. We were a bedroom community of New York City, and many speakers and musicians from the Big Apple were a regular part of our worship service. A few years passed, and my husband and I divorced. It was actually not a difficult divorce, as divorces go, as we both realized that the marriage was over. I'm not sure it ever began. My settlement was $1,000, my 2 kids, and our personal belongings. After almost 12 years of marriage, that's all there was. I returned to Southern California because that's where my family was and where I had been raised. I walked up the plane at LAX with $700 in my pocket. My plane tickets cost $300. My 2 children, aged 7 and 9, and we had no luggage because our clothes and everything were in cardboard boxes. My brother-in-law and his wife were there to greet us. Even though my parents had just inherited a house in Beverly Hills and had not seen us in 5 years, they made it very clear they had no interest in me or their grandchildren, and so they were not there. I'm an only child. I have no siblings. I did have a friend who lived in Long Beach who said we could stay with her until I got a teaching job. I needed a car, so my sister-in-law loaned me her new 1970 blue convertible VW Bug. She and my now ex-husband's brother were on their way to Hawaii for a couple of weeks, and I could use the car while they were gone. I picked up the car at the airport, and Mitzi, Dana, and I traveled to Long Beach to begin a new life. My friend Nancy immediately gave me very bad news about teaching. There were no jobs, and things looked really black for teachers. I'd not been expecting this, as I had turned down 2 teaching jobs in the East. I wasn't even looking for a job, and easily gotten a job in Morristown, New Jersey when I decided to return to work. But California was an entirely different situation altogether. I remember that I returned to California on a Tuesday, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. On Thursday, I looked up Unitarian churches in the yellow pages of the phone book. I knew I needed a community, and I had no idea if there would be a UU church in Long Beach or any place nearby. What a surprise and relief it was when I saw the Long Beach UU church ad in those yellow pages. On Sunday, I went to church with my 2 kids in the back of my borrowed blue convertible VW Bug. I had no idea if there would be kids in this church or even what kind of a UU church it was. As I drove up Atherton, I remember breathing a sigh of relief when I saw children playing on the lawn. I knew then it was going to be an okay place for me and my family. At that time, I felt like I was stuck on the face of El Capitan in Yosemite. Yep. Like I was a gecko with only sticky hands and feet to keep me from falling. I knew that if I could just find a niche on the face of that granite, I could carve out a life for my son, my daughter, and myself. The Long Beach UU Church was just a sliver of a ledge that I could barely get my fingers into, but it was a beginning. I was literally starting my life over from scratch. I was 33. When visitors come to our church, we know almost nothing about them or their situation. We do know that many people seeking a church are at some kind of crossroads in their lives, but we do not know their story. When I walked into the Long Beach UU Church in the spring of 1970, no one knew me and no one knew my story. I did not tell anyone about my circumstances for many, many months, and then only to one or two people. Mitzi, Dana, and I continued to go to church every Sunday. Rex Steinsons was the minister, and I loved his sermons. I made friends slowly, but Mitzi and Dana jumped right in. This is where I went once a week to get my batteries recharged, and I knew just how lucky I was to have a place like this in my life. As soon as I could, I began the search for a job that would give me an income until the fall semester. I called the Long Beach School District to inquire about a long-term substitute job. The woman on the phone almost laughed. I quickly realized that Nancy was right. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of teachers looking for jobs, and there were very few openings. I took a map and drew a line that was equal to the distance I was willing to communicate. I used that radius to draw a circle. My plan was to apply to every school district within that circle. As soon as I started to draw my circle, I had a startling realization. When one lives in Long Beach and needs to map out a circle, half of that circle lies in the Pacific Ocean. That cut down the number of school districts I could apply to in half. The upside was that when the stress was too great, and it often was, my kids and I took off and went swimming off the Long Beach Peninsula in Alameda's Bay. People sailing in the bay thought I was completely nuts, swimming around their boats with my two kids following me. Perhaps they were right. Meanwhile, I bought a brand new car, a white Ford Maverick, and rented a 3-bedroom apartment and a garage for my new car. I answered an ad in the newspaper and got a terrible part-time job teaching in a private school for emotionally disturbed children ages 5 to 15. My salary covered my child care, and there were no benefits. But being employed looked really good on my resume. We moved our Salvation Army furniture into our new digs, and then the three of us stood in Dana's bedroom. And I'll never forget when he looked at me and said, "Mom, we don't have anything." Dana looked scared, and so was I. I looked at Mitzi, and she looked scared too. I couldn't let them know how scary things really were for us, so I said as bravely as I could, "We'll get everything we need. It will just take time." I had no idea how I was going to provide for those two children, let alone myself, and this was in late March. These were stressful times, but the church was always my lifeline. Every Sunday, I had a place for my children and me to make friends. I could talk to other liberal people. I could go to a worship service that made sense to me and challenge my thinking on great topics. I did get my batteries recharged for yet another week. I looked forward to church all week long. It was a place without struggle, a refuge. I applied to almost 40 school districts within that half circle. I got 3 interviews, and in early August, the Los Alamitos School District offered me a contract. Los Alamitos proved to be an excellent school district, and the pay and the benefits were very good. I was very, very lucky. As soon as I could afford to move, I moved from Long Beach to Los Alamitos so Dana and Mitzi could go to school there. I joined the Orange County Teachers Credit Union as soon as I signed my teaching contract and deposited my first paycheck the 1st of October. I had been on my own for 6.5 months. My ex did pay child support, and he always paid on time. His check just covered my rent. My parents reluctantly loaned me $600 and gave me some furniture from my grandparents' home, earmarked for the Salvation Army. During the next 14 years, they never once invited me to their home. My father called me once.
Oh, God.
I've asked myself many times, what would I have done if there had been no ad for a Unitarian Universalist church in those yellow pages? Every time I ask myself this question, even today, I have no idea. I just draw a blank. Yes, I had some help from my brother-in-law and his wife, but that didn't last long. I had help from my friend Nancy and her mother, but that had complications as well. I had some token help from my parents, and I have no brothers or sisters. It was Sunday morning worship that was my consistent lifeline. The church gave me friends I could talk with and relate to. It was an oasis for me in a world of worry and struggle. It was a place I could always count on. This is why it's important to me to give back to this church, so there can be a healthy, vibrant UU church here for someone with a story like mine. We must always offer a strong sense of community where people can recharge their batteries, rebuild their lives, feel safe, and know that they and their families are always welcome here. Together, we made a covenant, agreeing that the mission of this church is to transform our lives and our communities. Helping and being there for people who are transforming their lives and the lives of their families is a part of that mission, and it's a big part. But it takes resources to make this happen, and we have no source of income other than our members and our friends, and that means all of us. So, members and friends, please visit the pledge table on the patio after church today and pick up your personalized pledge packet. Join with me in making a generous pledge this pledge season so that we can continue to build a strong presence in Orange County for all the people who are seeking our special brand of liberal religious faith. It won't happen unless we all make this pact together and make it happen.
It's a pretty powerful story. I was struck by it by 2 reasons. The first one was that she had this done in January, okay? I have holy envy for that. I don't have my stories done, my sermons done. She's amazing that way. But the other reason is the reasons why it was important to her, why this church was important to her, and how it kind of changed over time. So if you recall back in the East, when Sunny was back in New Jersey, like many people, she started going to a Unitarian Universalist church because of her children. She wanted them to have something they were starting to question. She wanted to have a place for them to hear different ideas maybe from the mainstream, and a friendly place also for herself. And there's lots of reasons why people come to a church. And there's sort of the 3 most popular that I have found, and one of which is they come for their children. They want something specifically for them. The second reason that I've heard out there is that I came here because I want to do social justice work, and I want people to join me in that work. Whether it's looking at homelessness or GLBTQ community, whatever it is, I want some people to be there with me. And the third reason why that I've heard most popular out there is people say they come here to meet someone. They just want to make friends. They want to be with like people that they can connect with. But I sort of have found also that sometimes if you go long enough, sometimes you find something you didn't even know that you needed. And just by a little segue, I noticed that some people, we talk about, sometimes we say, oh, well, we're more than a social club. Or, if you want to join a social club, go to a bridge party or something like that. But, social is so important. We are social creatures. We need one another. We need to connect with one another. I personally don't mind that we are also a social club, and we should be. Think about for Sunny, how much that connection meant to her, to have that. That's what we mean. It's not just sitting around talking around about the weather. Someone to share your stories with, share your pain with. But something does happen along the way, because we come with for one reason maybe, and then we find that maybe there's another reason that happens in communities. We find this. There's something that community becomes something more than what we had actually originally expected. And I think that, to quote a very famous person, his name is Jesus, you guys probably heard about him, right? In the Christian scriptures in Matthew 13, Jesus is trying to tell his disciples about what the kingdom of God is. So he says, the kingdom of God is like, and he tells all of these different things. Now, kingdom of God is not a term we use a lot here in Unitarian Universalist churches. We prefer the term beloved community. That's another term for it. This idea of how do we build a place where we all are welcome and loved. But one of the ways that he says, the kingdom of heaven is like a man, a merchant, seeking fine pearls. And on finding one pearl of extremely great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. Say that again. The kingdom of heaven is like a man, a merchant seeking fine pearls. And on finding one pearl of extremely great value, he went and sold all that he had, and he went and bought it. Now, it's such sort of I don't know about you, but it always struck me as a very odd parable. Like, what in the world is he talking about here? And you have to really sort of start really thinking about this. So here's this guy, this merchant, just so happens to be a merchant. He's going on with his life. He's buying and selling pearls. That's what he does. And then suddenly he finds a pearl, and it's not a diamond. It's not something so terribly different from what he's been already buying and selling. But it's so beautiful, so precious, something he didn't even know that he wanted that badly, that he's got to have it. And he gives up everything. He transforms. He becomes something different, because now he's no longer a merchant, right? He sold everything, and he's not selling that one pearl. I think sometimes that happens in our lives. We go along in our lives, and we're going along, and suddenly we realize that there's either something in our life that is far more precious than we ever realized, and we're changed. Or something comes into our life, and we're changed. Love can definitely do that. Last Friday, we had a memorial service here of Clayton Gorey, a wonderful congregant for many, many years. And I love hearing these stories about people and their lives, and I'm always sort of struck, always try to find messages in their stories. And what I loved about it is that Clayton started out as something of a daredevil. He was in the Merchant Marines, for example, and he helped build the Alcan Highway, which is this absolutely treacherous highway that goes through the Yukon up into Alaska, that's terribly dangerous. And then soon after that, it's sort of odd. You see, he goes to school, he gets his bachelor's degree, he gets his master's degree, he got an MBA, and he went off into the world and he did his things. And I realized, though, that something had changed him. Something transformed him between that sort of devil-may-care daredevil. And it was when he met his wife, Trula, and he fell deeply in love. And that was the other thing that struck me about Memorial, how long he loved her. For 66 years, they were in love with one another. He found his pearl, and he changed. He was changed by that pearl. He sort of settled down, but they had their own adventures. They traveled around the world. They had children. They had grandchildren. They had great-grandchildren. And they had one great-great-granddaughter. He had his adventures, but he was transformed by that love with Trula. That pearl of great price is finding that thing that you didn't even know you were looking for, and suddenly you realize that you need it, and it changes you. For Sunny, church became a pearl of great price for her. It was a place she already knew of. She knew about Unitarian Universalist churches. She knew she liked them. But it became more than a place just for her children to learn values. It became a lifeline for her during a very difficult time in her life. So I want to invite you all here today, if you want to take just a moment to close your eyes, and I just invite you to a little bit of a meditation. And to think about the reasons of why you came to this church. For some of you, today might be your very first day. Why did you come here? For those of you who've been here for 30 years, if you can remember back that far. How might that reason for coming change? Or how did it change over the years? For those of you who've been here for so long, when did it become a pearl for you? Or when might it? It's important to stop and think in gratitude for all that we have in our life. And sometimes we forget about those pearls. It's been so long ago. When I came to my first UU church, I came because I also wanted a community. I wanted a religious community that kind of didn't make me believe something I didn't believe in, that I was free to explore what those beliefs were. And I also wanted a church that might be open to having me as a minister, eventually. But what I found instead, it changed me profoundly. When I think about who that person was when I first walked through the doors, kind of defensive, you're not going to try to change me, are you? You know? I didn't think I would change. But I found this faith that called me. It called me to make the world a little bit better. It challenged me to stand on the side of love when sometimes I just really want to pummel people. It's a faith of people that are deeply committed in a way that I had never known how to be committed to a community before. I grew up moving around all the time. I never was committed ever to a church or committed to a specific community. And to see people who had been in there for, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, lifetimes, generations in a church was like a concept beyond me. And it's, to me, is one of the most beautiful things I've ever encountered. But it's so hard to put that into word, that transformation, that sense of what church means to us sometimes. Because it didn't happen for me all at once. It's only when I can look back and go, oh yeah, that's right. That's what we try to do on Pledge Sunday, is to remind people, what does this church mean to you? For me, it's about meeting people like Sunny and hearing their stories and letting those stories change me as well, to see the world differently through their eyes. And this feeling, it isn't rational, it's not logical, but it's important to remember what church is about. To me, church is a kind of pearl of great price. You might not know it when you first encounter it. It's just another pearl. But you stay here long enough, it becomes something more, something that you didn't expect, maybe. Our mission statement says that we transform our lives. What did I do with this? Sonny mentioned this. We transform our lives and our communities by living our principles. It's kind of our pearl. It's our one that we're out there trying to find. But transformation happens in many different ways. It's rarely just one big moment in time. It's small things that add up. Sonny also created this wonderful poster over here. If you get a chance, come over here and look at this. It shows all of the different things that we do here in church, and I don't have enough time to actually go through all of them and the different ways that we're helping out in the world and transforming our lives and our communities. Whether it's standing with the homeless or the LGBTQ community or immigrants and detainees, or maybe it's just simply when we are a refuge for those who are in crisis. All of that transforms us. This year, Sunny decided to take on running our annual pledge drive, and I believe this is the very first time that you've done this. Yeah. Because this church is for her a pearl of great value, and she wants you to know it too. And she's done amazing work putting this board together, putting individual packets, pledge packets together for you to pick up. It has even got your name on it. It's right outside these doors here. So today or tonight, when you're thinking about whenever you fill out your pledge card, I want you to think about two things. First, think about what this church means to you, or what it could mean to you. And then I want you to think about Sonny and all the Sonnies who are in our congregation or who are out there who are looking for us. Think about what the church means to them, what it has meant to them. Because it may seem like a really simple thing, just being here for inspiration, for someone to talk to on Sunday morning. But when someone is going through a rough time, when they're hanging on that cliff by their fingernails, that refuge is everything. So when you're thinking about writing that pledge, think about what gives you joy. You know, people talk about, when I used to write pledge, it used to be like, okay, what can I afford? And okay, there's a part of that. You gotta figure that out or whatever. But think about what gives you joy to give. The joy of creating a place that helps people holding onto those cliff edges. Or maybe a bridge so they don't have to scale those cliffs. Because it's together that each year we build this bridge. We build it hand in hand together. Won't you please all join us? Amen.